Hello, hello, hello. It is the 21st of March, losing my uh, sense of time. And I guess we're about a week and a half away from Easter. So this is good.
Yeah.
And today's topic is interconnectedness. And I think that's going to be kind of interesting for this whole thing of being international coaches and getting together as we do. We're certainly interconnected, and we're going to dig into that. But first, let's introduce ourselves. Go ahead, Shelley Ann.
Hi. Good day. Thank you, Steve. My name is Shelly Ann Edwards Byron, and I am a gratitude guide and habit coach. And every time I say that, I think, woohoo, because I feel like gratitude is like the keystone habit everybody needs to have. And what happens is that, sometimes for me, it happened when I hit 40. I was just like, everything started weighing down on me. And I started looking all around, thinking, okay, I need to add this, do that, because nothing I did felt like enough. And then I discovered gratitude, and my life completely changed. And that's what I teach my clients to do: embrace gratitude to get that joy and change in their lives. So we look at saying it right, which is focusing on self talk and making that more positive and empowering. We look at saying it loud, which is making gratitude tangible and bringing it into the physical world. And we look at saying it always, where we get into that daily habit. And when gratitude becomes that keystone habit, we build additional habits that help us get to where we want to be with joy and not just really burning the candle at both ends. So, working with gratitude has really made a difference for me, and I can talk about it forever. So much so that I have another YouTube channel that works with getting it done with gratitude, showing how to use gratitude to be more productive and pretty much get a handle on things. So if anybody who's listening wants to learn more about gratitude, they can check out my YouTube channel or send me a message on LinkedIn and we can have a chat.
Awesome. Um, I'm just making a quick note about a couple things you said there because I was thinking about them yesterday. I'll mention that in just a moment. Cass, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Cass J. Henry. I'm an abundance coach out of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and I offer my services both here in person as well as virtually. One of the things that I'm tasked with is helping my clients move from a position of lack to a position of abundance. And we do that using tools like affirmations, habit creation, mindset work, goal setting, experimentation, journaling, just to name a few. So if you are feeling stuck and like everything's going wrong in your world right now, reach out and let's have a conversation. I'd really love to be able to show you the abundance that's already there in your life right now. And you can find me on cassjhenry.com.
Excellent. Yeah, abundance is all around us and all inside us. We sometimes don't acknowledge it. We don't recognize it. Cass, it's wonderful what you're doing. Love it. And hello, my name is Steve. I'm known by many online as the WordPress Wizard and the Coach's Coach. I have decades of online experience and years of business success before that. Boy, I'm getting old. I'm a multi niched coaching practitioner, a published author, a digital content creator, an online presence consultant, a business success guide, and a personal development mentor. Boy, did I get all of them in there? I think so. I work with coaches and other professionals who want to start or expand their online presence. I also help them get unstuck in their personal and business lives so they can move forward on their own journey of success. And I make I guess I've been told anyway that I make tech understandable, and I earn my entire income online helping others do the same. You can find me at stephenbhenry.com. And as I often say, the time to hire your guide is before you get lost in the woods. Um, I want to just share that all three of us have been kind of busy lately. Shelley Ann, you're away from home right now. Um,
Yeah.
home is Trinidad and Tobago, a wonderful Caribbean location, and you're up in New York, big city, Big Apple, having a
And
bit of a
cold.
yeah, cold. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't quite spring as you're going up there, and it's a bit of a rainy, stormy time settling in there this week too. So that's kind of fun, in the other meaning of fun. And Cass, you've just gone through a big move, uh, moving from a
Yeah.
previous apartment to a new place, and uh, getting settled
You
in.
can maybe see through my blur back here. There are empty shelves behind me.
Yeah, yeah, still boxes. Yeah, I've done that a few
Mm.
times, so I know what it's like. It's good. And I've been busy working on the Open Conversations with International Coaches website. You can find that at OCICnetwork.com. Um, Fairly easy to remember, OCICnetwork.com. And it's not finished. A good website's always a work in progress anyway. It has a few little things to finish in the first go round, but it's certainly ready for prime time. I've been building websites for years, and I strongly believe that they should be open to the public right from the first moment. Don't wait to have everything perfect before you get it out there. Don't build it offline. Don't let your, if you hire it done, don't let your contractor build it offline. Get the domain, get the hosting, start building it live. We're going to be doing some tech sessions in the coming weeks in this presentation. And when we do one on websites, I'll tell you why that's so important, because it is. I know you don't want people to see it while it's still a mess, but you'll understand when we cover that. So today, interconnectedness. We're all interconnected. What was the movie 7 Degrees of Separation? Um,
6 degrees of
6 degrees of
separation.
separation. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And it's very interesting in our family here. Laura has been doing a great deal of genealogy and family tree kind of stuff, and uh, there's a whole story to tell there in terms of the degrees of separation or lack thereof. It's just mind bending how close people are that we hadn't even
Yeah.
thought about. Yeah. So we are all interconnected in many, many ways. And it's not just the physical either. So who wants to jump in? Get us started,
I can jump in.
please.
So yeah, interconnectedness is the state of being connected with each other. So the interconnectedness of things, all the things in the universe. And I thought that maybe the internet itself is a good example of what interconnectedness is, because we can all understand how one country is connected to another, one city is connected to another, one home is connected to another, one room in the home is connected to another. We all get that with the internet. And then with things like with apps like Netflix, you can and YouTube, you can be on one device and switch to another device depending on where you are and what you're doing, because it's interconnected on the internet. So that's sort of like a visual of what interconnectedness can be. But interconnectedness is so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger than the internet. It's present in every instance, every moment, from the smallest particle to the expanse of the universe, and every little piece in between. So I just wanted to sort of start with like that idea that the internet itself, we even call it interconnected net.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as you spoke there, what I thought of is the ripple effect. We have a lot of sayings and concepts about, if you drop that pebble in a pond and how the ripples will go out and impact and create that ongoing impact going out. And that's how I see interconnectedness. And how it works in terms of how we are all connected, because sometimes we think that, okay, this is just me, it is my, you know, realm, my personal views and ideas, and what I do doesn't matter. What I do is not going to impact anybody else. As long as you are alive, you are connected. And even before you came and after you leave, your presence connects with people around you and the rest of the world. And I find that quite interesting that, you know, when we speak philosophically, we have these ideas, but what does that mean on a practical day-to-day, everyday basis? I don't think most people think about how connected we are on a daily basis. You know, we sometimes just do things and then we wonder, huh, that came back, and we don't even realize that when it was going out, it always was meant to come back because of how connected we are.
Yeah, it's interesting. You use the ripple analogy again. That's cropped up in several of your presentations and your sharing,
Yeah.
and it's got me thinking about it over the past weeks because it is such a good analogy. And again today, what I realize about it from a technical perspective, when you drop the pebble in the pond, and the ripples go out and they curve away from the point of dropping the pebble, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger curves, and as they go, and when they hit the shore they bounce back and they curve the other way again, starting out small and getting bigger and bigger. And there's a series of them going both ways, and there's a point where they cross, and that point where they cross is interconnectedness, and it actually has a key element called parallax, where there's an apparent visual circle that occurs, a small circle that occurs. You can see this yourself if you're driving down the road in a car and there are telephone or hydro wires, any kind of wires strung from the poles as you go along. And as those wires dip, if one dips a little more than the other and they cross, they don't actually touch because they're spaced apart with the whatever structures are holding them, but visually you see where they cross, and the point where they cross actually runs along the wire as you drive, because your perspective on the point of crossing changes as the car moves. And so you see that crossing point moving, and you'll see that little circle where they cross, a little kind of an empty circle with a line around it. You'll see that move along the wire. If you've never noticed that before, first time, look for it when you travel. And so we have things that are not even touching, and yet they interact with each other. Cass mentioned about all of the things. And this is a visual thing. It's not actually a physical thing, but it shows a different dimension of interconnectedness. And with us as people, we have, how many times have you said, somebody says a word, oh, I was just thinking of that, or just going to speak about that, or just going to ask that. Or, the phone rings and you've been thinking about your uncle and he's on the phone calling you. This interconnectedness that goes on at a totally different level. Think of those wires and the little bead running along the wires. It's when we try to imagine the scope of interconnectedness, it's almost impossible. It's so vast, and it is so powerful as we bring that into our lives and we take stock of it. We apply it to what we're doing, and it gives us a power that we may not have realized we had.
I first came across the idea of interconnectedness or interdependence through the Buddhist teachings. And I want to just sort of plug a little podcast here. It's called Secular Buddhism with Noah Ricchetti. And The whole sort of secular Buddhism piece is based around the Dalai Lama quote: do not try to use what you learn from Buddhism to be a Buddhist. Use it to be a better whatever you already are. And I love that, because I think that's really what we're doing here with this open conversations, is that we're talking about all these different topics that are interconnected, and we're hoping to reach out to coaches. And we're not saying come be Cass or Shelly-Ann or Stephen. We're saying take these tools and put them in the toolbox that you already have in your interconnected life, and pull them out and use them when they're useful to you. So I really love that idea about being a better whatever you already are.
Yeah, that's a very interesting concept, and I think dealing with going back to the ripple effect, I do like that visualization because of the fact that it goes out and comes back, and there's that constant movement, because I feel like that is what life is, that constant movement. And sometimes we think that the pond is calm, when at that point the movement might not be by us, but it's out there coming back, or it's already gone out going forward. And so the whole idea of being interconnected is that we are connected whether we see it immediately or not. And to me, that's an important concept, because, sometimes you say, well, look, I didn't see it. And because I did not see it, it doesn't exist, or it doesn't impact me, or it's not going to impact other people. But whether we see it or not, it is out there with the waves going away or coming forward. And that makes it even more important that we recognize the impact of what we individually do. And Stephen, you mentioned about, embracing the idea of interconnectedness. And I would really like to get a view of what that means on a practical basis. Because one of the things that I recognize for me, and I know for lots of other people as well, when we get into these sort of philosophical ideas, at some point I need something tangible to make it um visible for me, and not necessarily visible as in seeing, but practical that I can hold it. So what does that look like in terms of being interconnected and embracing that idea for both of you?
I can jump in and say something that you've talked about often is the oh gosh, I want to say wheel of life.
uh,
And I
yeah.
think that specifically is looking at all the ways that we are interconnected with our world around us, that whether it's social or work or physical or mental, and breaking that all down to say, like, where are we at the spoke of this wheel that is interconnected with all these different parts of our world around us.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I I have understood and applied, I guess, the concept of interconnectedness in my life for a long time. I started very early as a teenager with the concept of the law of attraction. And I didn't even know at the time that it was called the law of attraction. And it was simultaneous with discovering synchronicity. And the first time that a example of synchronicity jumped out at me, I was probably 12 or 14 years old, and it uh, just shocked me when I recognized what it was and realized the impact of it. That moment of two things coming together, me experiencing it, and it actually happening at that moment, meant that everything I had done in my life previous to that, and this is as a 12 or 14-year-old kid thinking, everything I had done in my life previous to that, whether I flipped a pancake or didn't flip a pancake, all of it back to the moment I was born impacted that moment. If I chose to have eggs for breakfast along with my pancakes and had to go and turn to the refrigerator to get the box of eggs out and make the eggs, that moment would not have come together, because that particular moment involved me doing something at the moment while something else happened simultaneously, and there was a connection. There appeared to be a connection. There was no connection, but there appeared to be a connection. And when I realized they were not connected, they were two separate things, just the amazement of them happening simultaneously, the synchronicity of it. And then I realized, whoa, wait a minute. And again, this is a 12 or 14-year-old kid thinking, not just me, but everybody who interacted with me, everybody who stopped and said hi, and I stopped and said hi. And then it hit me, not just my life, but all of history, all of existence. Didn't know about the Big Bang at that time, or whatever the current concept is of the starting of time, but whatever it was, it hit me that all had to happen. Mind-boggling, impossible to think about, impossible to comprehend, and yet it all had to happen for that moment. And so I'm kind of sorry to tell you, Shelly Ann, it isn't really possible, at least to my way of thinking, to give you, what is it that Einstein was working on, and the fellow from England that was in the wheelchair. I can't think. I'm sorry?
Hawkins?
Hawking, yeah. Stephen Hawkins, yeah, I should remember his name. They were working on the theory of everything. Well, when it comes to interconnectedness, and they never got there, either of them, as brilliant as they were, with interconnectedness, the theory of everything is just beyond us. It is so phenomenal. All we can do is be anecdotal. Cass, go ahead.
So I pulled a quote, and I think this is really practical in a way.
Or was that your hand?
Oh, I am talking. Can you not hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing.
Okay. So I think this is really practical and tangible. It's a quote from the First Nations Pedagogy website. It says, "Interconnection is a central core of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis worldviews and ways of knowing. Some First Nations sum this up with the phrase, 'all my relations.' This mindset reflects people who are aware that everything in the universe is connected. It also reinforces that everyone and everything has a purpose, is worthy of respect and caring, and has a place in the grand scheme of life. First Nations relationships fully embrace the notion that people and their families are strongly connected to the communities they live in, their ancestors and future descendants, the land they live on, and all of the plant, animal, and other creatures that live upon it. They know they are stewards of the earth and have traditionally lived in harmony with their environment for millennia. Their traditional practices boast amazing sustainability, ecological awareness and knowledge, and a strong scientific understanding of the earth, weather, cycles of seasons, and medicinal food sources, marine foods and harvesting, and creating everything they need from nature's bounty. Before colonization, these practices and systems worked perfectly and in harmony with the world around them. They left a very light footprint upon the earth." And I think that's the practical piece, is that living in a way that becomes this harmonious connection with your world around you, so that you're not fighting against, or you're not trying to catch the fish when they're not swimming upstream, kind of thing. I don't know how to explain that differently.
But yeah, but I get the point, and that's what I wanted to sort of explore just a little bit, because I know sometimes when, well, at least for me, when I was just getting into these kinds of conversations, recognizing what these things mean in a practical way in my life didn't come so easily. And so I thought, it would be so interesting to explore what does that mean for my life when I say I believe we're all connected? What does that mean for my actions? And I came across two things when I was reading on the issue. One is a quote from Herman Melville, and the other is scientific concept. So I'll go with the quote first. The quote says, "We cannot live only for ourselves. 1,000 fibers connect us with our fellow men, and among those fibers, as sympathetic threads, our actions run as causes and they come back to us as effects." And so the idea of being interconnected is that whatever I do is going to impact others, and that impact on others is going to come back to me as well, because it's a sort of, it's interconnected. So it's not just one way, it's interconnected, so it goes both ways. And the science side of it, there's a theory called social baseline theory, and that theory suggests that the human brain operates under the assumption that our interactions with others are a vital resource that helps us stay safe and meet our goals. So it's a very practical thing to the point of feeling safe and meeting our goals and our agendas. So it is really at the core of who we are and what we do. And so when I put the two together, while we're looking at the interconnectedness as how we are connected with other people, it is also how other people are connected to us. And so it comes back to how we see ourselves as individuals, or as in the in what you shared, Cass, part of a community that is part of a community that is part of a community, because we go from self to family to immediate village location to wider community to society to the world. So it goes in levels, but it's all really a, like really I like the inter part of that interconnectedness. It's just not from me to out, it's also from out to in.
Well, if it was just one way, it would be connectedness. It
Yeah.
is the inter part that makes it there. And Melville, thinking in his time, um, when a millionaire was a rarity, and he talked about 1,000 fibers, and fiber optic hadn't even been invented yet. But he talked about 1,000 fibers, 1,000 strands. He undervalued what's there. A million, a billion, a trillion wouldn't be enough. Infinite, although that is, an undefined amount, is probably closer to the reality. We are interconnected in so many ways. And I mentioned law of attraction and was going to pick up on that. But you've done such a beautiful job, because we think sometimes of the law of attraction as us, our subconscious, reaching out to the universe, whatever that is for people, their God, the cosmos, the whatever it is to them, but the interconnectedness of everything that is there. And we think of that as reaching out and then getting an answer back that we can use. And it doesn't happen that way. And that's also why so many people say it doesn't work, because they don't allow it to work. They fix their focus on things that aren't true. And so they don't allow it to work. But it goes from us out to the universe, which changes. Cass, you said everything is interconnected, and we know now from quantum physics that that's absolutely true. Everything is a vibration, and all of the vibrations affect each other. The movement of a planet in a distant galaxy, butterfly effect, affects us here in teeny tiny ways, so small that we can't detect them with the equipment we have now, but nonetheless there's connection. Galaxies, move through the universe affecting each other, affected by each other. Molecules are affected by each other. And if we get really into quantum physics and we get into the idea of a molecule, or at least of an electron having its existence in more than one place at the same time, that can kind of bend your mind. But it's all about that interconnectedness of space time. And when we realize that that's happening, then we start to realize that things go from us to the universe, making changes that go back to other people. And then we start to realize, as you said in the scientific concept of it, that those people then interact with us. Their thoughts, their energies, their vibrations, think Beach Boys, they they are all interacting and interaffecting each other. We're interconnected at levels that we're not even conscious about. It's a little mind bending as you start to play with it, but it starts to
Yeah.
account for why things happen the way they do, and why unexpected things happen, and why synchronicity, coincidences. And it is, I mean, the beauty of interconnectedness is it doesn't matter what we think or how we define it, it's there. And Cass, one other thing, my first mentor was my father, but my first non-father mentor occurred when I was from grade 6 to grade 8. He was a student who attended our school. He joined us at grade 6 and was there through grade 8. He was the son of a chief of a local native tribe where I grew up. And his father, the chief, had actually made arrangements for him to go to the white man's school instead of the native school, because he wanted his son to have experience with other people to inform him for when he became the chief. And for some reason, he took me under his wing, and he taught me many things, and he introduced me to people. There was a person in Niagara Falls at that time, again, a Native American, who was predicting the weather. And I was introduced to him, and long bicycle ride from St. Catharines to Niagara Falls, but I was able to meet this person and be introduced to him and learn about the weather in ways that I would never have learned from science. In fact, I was interested in the weather and had got from the Ontario government, they provided some teaching packets on weather and predictions and plotting and so on. And I had got one of those packages just out of interest, and I had shared it in the classroom, kind of a show and tell thing. And that was what cued him to take me to this guy who really knew about the weather. And by being in touch, even though he lived in the metropolis of Niagara Falls, he would go down to the falls and stand at the closest point to the water going over
So
the falls.
that's
And
the interconnectedness that you just mentioned. Sorry for
yeah, go ahead.
interrupting, but
Oh,
I just saw while you were speaking and talking about, the idea that many people have that I send this out and then it'll come back to me. What happened is that you were interested in learning about the weather, and so you were taking action. And I think that's also the bit that gets a lot of people stomped on the law of attraction. They send it out verbally, and then they sit back and
wait
wait
for it. Wait
for it
for it.
to
Yeah,
come back.
you got to
But
take action.
yeah, and so
Yeah,
so you took
yeah.
action by reaching out and getting the material, and then it triggered him.
Yeah,
So it didn't come directly to you. It took an alternate path.
yeah.
And I feel like that is an a really intricate and important part of the interconnectedness, that indirect nature of how it operates sometimes. And so it is really heavy on the mind when you really get into the details and the quantum physics. And so for me, practically, I don't really care for my mind to be that occupied all the time. I focus on the actions that I would take
Mhm.
that would be the cause, as Melville said, that would create the effect and so on. And that's where I simplify it to a certain
Yeah.
sense and make it practical. But I know
And
Cass
that's
wanted to say something too.
just one quick thing, Cass. That's where taking the action and seeing these things, it's more anecdotal information that you can look at and see the practicality of it, rather than some theory that lays it out, but is kind of hard to get your mind around. And so we experience the anecdotal information of interconnectedness. Sorry, Cass, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's okay. This is great, especially the practicality of these pieces and these anecdotes, right? I cannot remember what you said that triggered this for me, but I was really thinking about community and how community is the interconnectedness of humans. And there's a study that I think it gets a little morphed. There's somebody who did a TED talk about it who sort of takes the findings and does a little tweaking with it. But there's a study that was done by Bruce K. Alexander in British Columbia called Rat Park. And I don't know if you've seen that going around. There's a little meme that goes around about it. And he basically had a bunch of different variations on how this worked, but he had some rats in cages and he had some rats in this like massive like 200 times the size of the cage of the other ones, where they lived in community. They had entertainment, they had privacy if they wanted it for mating, they had all the comforts. You could call it rat heaven. They called it Rat Park. And he was trying to look at drug use, and he fed the ones in cages. They had the option between tap water and sweetened morphine water. And the same thing happened for the rats in Rat Park. They had the option to drink either tap water or the other. And like you might think, the rats in the cages, they were alone, they had no entertainment, and they mostly drank that morphine water because it I don't know what it did for a rat, but it did with whatever they thought they wanted in that moment. And in the Rat Park, where they had all this stimulation and all this community, they almost never drank the morphine water. They strictly drank the tap water because that's what their body needed to be healthy and strong, and that's how their mind needed to be capable to interact. And the TED Talk goes on about how it relates this to humans and drug use. That environment is a big piece of that drug use, and I think that it's really telling that people in isolation who can't grasp the interconnectedness of themselves, their community, and they don't know that they are not alone. Then that's where that isolation and mistrust and hostility and apathy, the depression comes in, and often drug use comes in. Whereas if we have people in community, that type of stuff it can happen, but it doesn't normally happen. It doesn't happen on the regular. So that interconnectedness, I think there's another study, sorry to talk about these studies,
No,
I don't
that's
have
fine.
all the
I'm making
names.
notes.
I think there's another study that looks at people leaving hospitals, and they get sent a drug regimen to take home with them for their pain control, and then they look at if the person is isolated, they may develop a dependency on these pain pills. Whereas if the person is in community and has other supports and other people interconnected with them, they're not likely to develop that dependency. And there's so many ways that like community as a part of interconnectedness are beneficial and healthy, and they help us have harmony in our life. I think those practical ways are really important that people study that kind of stuff, because it is that interconnectedness is part of the society that we live in.
And I think the idea that the being alone and feeling alone can happen anywhere is not necessarily, it doesn't look the same for everyone. And so the thought I got while you were speaking in the first study was that even when someone can have physical amenities that on the outside look like community, they may not actually have the actual community with the human connection. And so what it looks like, I guess, not stereotyping or not assuming that if something looks a certain way on the outside, then, is definitely that way. Because I know there are people who, in a room with lots of other people, they still feel alone because of that, how they see connectedness and how they see themselves and the other people around them and so on. So that really kind of stood out for me. And then, Steve, while you were speaking, you know what occurred to me?
Yeah.
Part of the connectedness in community, as Cass was talking about there, comes from story and sharing
Yes.
stories. And
Yeah.
and I love that aspect of community, because the more I think about it and the more I read and interact, the idea of story is so huge in every aspect of our lives. There's this whole movement in business about sharing your story and making your customers' story visible and connecting with each other through story. And in business, where we wouldn't normally think it would be such a big deal, but it just goes to show how fundamental sharing and being connected is in every aspect of life.
Steve often talks about that Coca-Cola story, right? The idea that they've built this story around their business, and that's around their brand, and that's what's kept them so high for so many years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The number one recognized brand around the world. And you can say whatever you want about Amazon and various other things, but they're not a patch on Coca-Cola. Um, yeah, it's interesting to me. First of all, I've had this part of the conversation twice this week already, dealing with the idea that within a community today, there are often the visual appearance of a community. And I've used the example, my own neighborhood right here. We often sit on the porch in the front of our house. We're in a small city, and we're on a busy residential street. It's actually a connecting link between two highways, so it does get a lot of traffic, especially first thing in the morning, and then at close of business. Cars go whoosh 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 one way, and then they go whoosh 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 the other way, and then it's quiet during the day. Right now, there's no traffic out there. There'll be a little bit at noon, but we're in just a regular community, and there's houses beside us on each side, and there's houses across the street, and we're on a block in the city, and the house beside us on the one side is at the corner for the next street, and then there's like 5 or 6 houses going down before we get to the next corner, and halfway in between there's an alleyway, and we sit out on the porch with a view of all of that. And we often sit out late at night, or like real early in the morning, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and it's totally quiet, but the street lights are on, and we have a view of the neighborhood. And it is amazing to me that after being here for 24 years, I don't really know anybody of any of the houses I can see from our porch, about a dozen houses. I don't know anybody that lives in them. We used to know the fellow that lived next door, but he died, and not there anymore. And We used to know the people that lived on the other side. Early when I came here, they were people that Laura knew, and they moved away. And we just, people have moved in, and we've tried to talk to them, and we've, taken things over to welcome them and things like that. But people don't do that anymore. So, it's uncomfortable. And now we don't do that. And, just through experience, the negative experience. And so we see people coming and going. We recognize their cars. We, kind of have an idea of what they're doing and where they're going, going to work in the morning, coming home in the afternoon, going shopping during the day because they're retired. So we have a feel for the community, but we don't have the interconnectedness on the personal level. We're interconnected because we can see what's going on and it's happening around us, but it's not the same. So that situation, societal and so on. But I think that that certainly affects that today. There's probably more drug. This is just off the top of my head, anecdotal. It's not. I haven't even seen a study on it at all. But there's probably more drug use today because people are isolated, even though they're close. Our neighbors are there, and we see them, and we might occasionally say hi, as we're going out to the car and they're coming in from the car, kind of thing. But we don't interact. We're not connected locally, and so people will tend to feel isolated. But another point on that I got from what you were saying, Shelley-Ann, about people who go to a party or an activity, a bar, whatever it is, and they feel alone even though they're surrounded by people. There are also people who don't go to those places because they feel overwhelmed by them, and so they self-isolate, they stay alone rather than go and subject them to those things. It's the opposite side of the coin. I am, to some extent, an empath. If I go into a bar or a party or a crowded room with a lot of people, I can immediately feel or sense that person over there who's really sad, or that person over there who's really happy, even though they might not be projecting that visually. They may be interacting, they may be standing in a group of 3 people holding drinks in their hands and chatting, but that one is immensely sad. I can feel it. And I've tested it, and I'm mostly right with that sort of thing. I know a person who is even more sensitive than I am, and they cannot physically stand. They will have a breakdown if they're in a room with those kinds of people. So we're interconnected at psychological levels as well. And a lot of us don't see that. We're not aware of that. And it is kind of eye-opening when, if you ever do become aware of it, it can be a little bit of culture shock. But there are things at physical and mental levels and beyond, whatever beyond is, that affect us, affect the way we interact with other people, the mood swings that we have. Yeah.
I'd like to suggest that the community that you watch in your neighborhood is not really a community. I think we use the word neighborhood and community interchangeably.
Yeah, neighborhood.
But it's not a community because it isn't interconnected. I don't think it can be if it's not interconnected.
It does have some connections, though, in the sense that we have to
sure, you have a mail deliverer who comes to all the houses, and you all have to shovel your sidewalks and, that kind of, when there's snow on them, right? But I think that what's going on, especially in North America, is that independence was created by capitalism to have us, everybody needs their own refrigerator, everybody needs their own telephone line, everybody needs their own car, and there's no community use of these types of things. And I think independence is there to suck money out of people, and that independence is the antithesis to community.
I have tried in the past, some time ago, but in that regard, to knit together a community of neighbors over purchasing food, to be able to
Bulk.
be aware of when there's a sale on at a place, and to have an idea of what the community uses, and so we can check with each other, or not even have to check, because we know that our community will absorb when we happen to come across a flash sale. What was it, Walmart or no, Kmart used to have the blue light special, where they
Blue light specials,
wheeled out
yeah.
a cart that had a pole on it with a blue flashing light on the top, and it would be in a certain aisle, and that item that was there would be on special. So if you had the community, and you had the blessing of the community and the understanding of the needs, you could pick up 6 of them or a dozen of them or whatever, and know that the people would take them. Failed miserably in those kinds of things. Here in Kansas, a local organization developed a process that was all through the heartland, running from Texas, up to the Canadian border, to share food, produce. So they would get the various types of produce, and they would put together a box that you would kind of sign up to take that box every week or month. I forget what it was now, but you would pay a price for membership, and that would get you this box of stuff. And the bulk would be shipped into a local church or a school, and volunteers would go in and box it up individually for each of the boxes. They knew how many people they had, so there would be, if there were 40 people signed up, there would be 40 cauliflower, that they would have to put one in each heads, thank you, in each box. And that worked for a while, but people drifted away. Wasn't convenient. It was on a certain day, and not everybody could always attend on that day, and it was awkward to get somebody to pick it up for you, because we didn't have the community. We didn't have that interconnected.
So I have a question. Then, aside from the capitalism, which I fully understand, creating the individualism for financial gain, what do you suppose creates a fear in people, or um, interrupts this sense of community that, well, interrupts people from acknowledging it? Because we are interconnected, whether we acknowledge it or not. But when people don't acknowledge it, and they actively don't acknowledge it, what's that gap? Because, and I'm asking the question because, Cass, you said the community and the neighborhood, because of there isn't that interconnection, but I believe there are interconnections, because if one person in that block does something, it's going to affect everybody else, and vice versa. So there is the interconnectedness, but it's not recognized as a community because of whatever's happening in the individual homes. What do you suppose is that barrier?
Well, first of all, there are multiple levels, as we've talked, of interconnectedness. So when somebody who's not even from the community drives recklessly through the community, heaven forbid they hit a child, we have a sense of loss that affects most of the people, to differing degrees, but affects most of the people in the area. The neighbor that I mentioned that we used to know had a dog who was on a leash, and everything was fine. But one day he let him off the leash, and the dog ran out in front of a car, which ran over him and killed him. And it affected those of us who knew the old man and his dog. So there was interconnectedness there, even though we were, we never had dinner together, or took gifts back and forth or anything else like that. But we were on speaking terms, and my granddaughter, when she visited, loved the dog, but was afraid to touch it, because it was one of those little, I don't know, Mexican terriers or whatever, and it was all, yippy and at the end of its leash and jumping up, and she would stand 3 feet away, actually causing it to be more vociferous than it would be otherwise. But she just didn't have the braveness to go a step further. But so there is interconnectedness at different levels. But I think along with capitalism, there are other driving factors that drive us apart deliberately. Politics, the politics of fear for the purpose of control, the same as the capitalist for the control of the spending money, the fear to control the vote. There's these things where we are connected with capitalism. We are connected, even if we're against capitalism, we're connected with it. If we're against the fear, the politics of fear, we're still connected with it because we're either for it or against it. We either vote or don't vote. Those are interconnected aspects, plus or minus. So what is it about it? I think in the grand scheme, it's simply human nature. When we can't be part of a local community, we want to be part of some other community. We want to go to a Trump rally. We want to go to a local school board meeting. We want to be part of something. We're driven by that. Maybe I'm wrong, Kaz.
Well, I thought you meant it the other way around. I thought you meant that it was human nature to not be connected, but it is human nature to be connected, absolutely. And I think that it is,
exactly.
that it works against capitalism and money to have us interconnected, because then we are communities that support and scaffold and enrich each other. And instead of only, I find it telling that the two examples you brought up were about loss. That it is also our joys, but they're not necessarily so apparent to our unknown neighbors, whereas something that happens as a loss out in the street can be felt, its ripple effects, going back to that, in bigger ways because of our lack of interconnectedness. And I notice we're coming up on the end
that's
here,
where
and I
your
just wanted
abundance
to...
The abundance coaching, Stephen was saying that's where abundance coaching comes in.
Yeah,
right,
it's so powerful because you're taking that lack to abundance, and I know this, and yet I'm more likely to give a negative example than a positive example, because yes, living in a no world, a book that I read years ago, the stoplight is red to stop no longer than it is green to go. So why don't we call it a go light? But it's the negative impact on forcing us to stop that sits with us.
I wanted to just drop this quote that Buddhism holds that human beings, far from being isolated entities, are part of a larger symbiotic fabric of coexistence where, because this exists, so does that. And because that exists, so does this. Mm-hmm. And that's interconnectedness in a snapshot for me. Yeah. With those things, you need to be interconnected. And I'm also wondering what your final thoughts might be.
All of the above.
Yeah. I was thinking about the what forms that barrier, because while we long for this interconnectedness, there is a fear that interconnectedness makes us vulnerable, and many people don't like to feel vulnerable, and that's where I think that breakdown is. And so, like Steve said, we don't necessarily form that visual and overt connection in our physical spaces within arm's reach, but we're online and we're connecting with other communities because that drive to be interconnected and to acknowledge it and recognize it and experience it is so strong. We find ways to fill it. And sometimes those ways include substances and other things that end up being harmful. And so I feel like the vulnerability and being open to others, that is where they, I guess the pain is for a lot of people. So that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
The one thing you mentioned was barriers, and barriers are also a way of being interconnected. If we're separated by a barrier, then that barrier has to be impacting us, and it is therefore impacting the person on the other side of the barrier, or the experience on the other side of the barrier, whatever it is, and thus we are connected by the barrier. If you're a Trekkie, you'll remember Spock when he was beyond the glass in the room with the radiation, and he put his hand up on the window, and Kirk put his hand on the window, and the famous words that were said, connected through a barrier. And so I think that interconnectedness is so grand in its scope that it is hard to get our mind around, because we're trying to find the edges, and there may not be any edges. There simply
Quite
may
possibly.
not be.
Why don't we do healthy boundaries next week?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about barriers and edges, and
Yeah.
let's talk about some healthy ones, healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
great, Cass. You do it again. I love it. Yeah.
Nicely done.
And here we are at the end of the time. We could talk about this. This has been the most involved conversation I think we have ever had, with amazing scope on a topic that has even greater scope. So I don't know where we go with this again in the future, but it is certainly something we probably will need to revisit. And on that note, thank you, panel. I'm really expressing gratitude here for you being part of this. And by the way, there's 3 of us here, and there's space for 4. So anybody watching who is a coach and would like to join us for a conversation, and maybe even has a topic to suggest, reach out to us. You can contact us through the website, and that is OCICnetwork.com. And if you're not a coach, but you have something to share, or something to ask, and you would like to be part of a conversation with coaches, we'll entertain that as well. So reach out to us, talk to us. We'd love to meet you and be interconnected. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.